Welcome to the Mindset Game podcast. I'm Vered Kogan, and with all my heart, I'm very excited to introduce you to Lino Casalino. Lino is a consulting partner with PwC Canada, focused on digital operations and supply chain transformation. Over his 35 years as a management consultant, Lino has advised over 100 clients in cross-industry organizations to transform their operations through shifts in supply chain strategy, planning, and execution in order to drive efficiency improvements, be more cost-effective, and improve service levels. He's focused on transformation enablement through digital automation and technology, people, organizational capabilities, and through process improvement. Lino has written numerous articles and white papers on various topics related to supply chain and operations management, and has advised client boards, CEOs, and executives, as well as presented at a number of industry events. He is truly an expert on change, and I'm absolutely excited to dive into the topic of organizational change, and even more specifically, the human side of organizational change on our episode today. And on a personal note, Lino was my boss many years ago. He was the partner that I reported to when I worked as a management consultant at PwC years ago. So it's extra joyful and extra special for me to have our conversation today. Thank you so much, Lino, for being here.
You're very welcome, Barrett. And for all the same reasons, it's just as special for me. So super happy to be here.
Thank you, Lino. So how about we dive right in, because a lot of the people listening are either currently going through some changes in their teams, in their organizations, or maybe they're seeking to create some changes and they would love some insights, guidance, strategies on how to be even more effective. And so how about we start with trends? What are you seeing as some of the recent trends with regards to organizational changes these days?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, Vered, like my area of focus is really on operations and supply chain, right? And if you take a look at how supply chain has been impacted, both through COVID and post-COVID, there's a lot of transformation happening, right? And with that transformation, it not just impacts changes to the actual supply chains themselves, but it obviously impacts the people running the supply chains, right? And so some of the projects that we get involved in and things that we see could involve changing the infrastructure of a client supply chain, i.e., looking at the number and location of facilities. So you could end up closing certain facilities and opening up new facilities. So it could end up being job loss or also at the same time job creation. It could involve bringing in new technologies, right? And that's a lot of what we do. So there's a lot of digitization happening in supply chain. And with new technologies, especially things like AI, machine learning, comes fear, anxiety of the unknown, right? And so I think those are some of the factors impacting the people side of what I'm seeing in transformation as it relates to supply chain. So as if you hear kind of some of the underpinnings of changes in my opening, you start to see, okay, there could be some job losses, there could be jobs being impacted, there could be new technologies, meaning new skills that people don't have. So they're fearful of that. You know, are they going to be able to keep up with upskilling requirements of the new digital world that we're operating in? And so I think those are some of the fears and anxieties that cause resistance that we see, and things that we need to keep in mind and our clients need to keep in mind as they look for ways to take their organizations to the next level.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And imagine anybody listening who has experienced some form of unknown in their career or business has felt some of that fear and anxiety, right? Whether it's a large change or something small, anything, especially, during COVID time, obviously there were a lot of unknowns. And since then, things are moving very quickly from an automation kind of perspective. As you mentioned, there's a lot of technological changes that companies are going through. So that brings us to kind of this idea that there are two sides to a change, right? There's obviously the technical change, right? We need to have the know-how, the correct processes, and so on. On the system side, on the technical side, and then of course the people side, which, as you said, for some people it might be fears of job loss. Sometimes it's job gain, right? It could go either way, right? Positive or not so positive, people impact. And so, what are you seeing in the projects that are coming into as some of the ways that this resistance can either be navigated or maybe even avoided? What are some things that people need to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think what I always recommend and what I do myself and what I tend to focus in on is trying to really peel back the onion or unpack what is causing, the fear, the anxiety, some of the hesitation, or what might be really causing resistance, and looking at it from that perspective. And sometimes, again, these changes could be internal. They could be with your own employees, with executives. It could be external, i.e., you're making changes to operations that impact your customers, right? And potentially your suppliers. And that could also cause anxiety and resistance, right? Outside your organization. But if we look at it from the perspective of, who we're servicing as our clients, which tend to be, again, we could be brought in by the board, or we could be brought in by a CEO or an executive team to help, in the transformation effort. They're looking for ways in which to identify and mitigate some of this resistance. And so, to your question, I guess some of the things that we would want to explore is looking at it from, well, are there others that have already gone down this journey that we can connect you with, right? To help educate you as a team and educate your employees about what this journey could look like and how it was made successful by company ABC. So that is something that we either get asked or we tend to want to bring forward to clients. It's a good way to help put people at ease, right? There's someone else that's already gone down this journey. In other words, there's someone else that has actually been successful at doing what you're trying to do. Let us connect you up with them, and let's understand what they went through and what lessons could be learned, right? So that's very powerful for a lot of organizations to go down that journey. Some of that we bring ourselves, obviously, having been through a number of different clients and environments and seen a lot, both good and bad. Some of that can come through ourselves and other advisors to clients, but it's not as impactful or as powerful as connecting up with the actual organizations themselves and hearing from it firsthand, right? So I think that's one thing. The other is to try to look at it from the perspective of, how can we turn that resistance into a very positive outcome, right, for people? So that's where we focus on things like upskilling and training. So with any new technologies you can imagine, or with any automation, there is, a fair amount of anxiety, unknown. Is this part of a cost-cutting effort? Does the cost-cutting effort include me and staff, right? Are we going to be impacted? And so there tends to be a lot of that noise in the system, and so we typically get involved, in helping to, throw a wet blanket on it, if you will, to try to, ease the fires that might be burning in the organization. And the way that you would want to do that is to create some excitement, right? And create that excitement by focusing in on upskilling and training. And for example, many of the projects and scope that we look at could be helping people get from more of a transaction focused job into more of an analytics focused job, where you're looking to extract data from the system and transforming it into a different way, trying to find strategic insights from data, as again, opposed to maybe a job where it's just transaction level processing. And so we look at, how can we try to turn what could be a fearful or anxious type of project or initiative into something that could be very beneficial for staff and for the company as a whole. And those are some of the ways that we would tend to do it. So it's identifying external companies that have gone through the journey, sharing lessons learned, using training and upskilling as sort of a mechanism or means to create some excitement, and a path forward for staff. So I think they want to see what the path forward is. As you can imagine, a lot of that anxiety and fear is around, what does this mean for me? A, is my job going to get impacted, and B, how, and then C, is there some future here for me as part of this overall transformation effort? And I think those are important things that need to be identified, realized, and have strategies and some thinking around. And so hopefully that's some helpful insight around ways that companies can do that.
Absolutely. It's very helpful. And so just to recap, I mean, there are a few really, really juicy nuggets in there. So really first, it's helping people to feel at ease, right? So at kind of a more senior level, right? Those are organizing the change. Let's show you some evidence that other organizations have been successful, right? Whether it's your past clients or other clients that have gone through the full thing and have come out on the other side and survived and hopefully even thrived. And so that's really cool because that gives them evidence that they can believe in this, yes, that it could be successful. And once they know that other people have done it, then it releases some of the doubt. And that's really cool at a senior leadership level in particular, because those that are the sponsors of the change, if they are doubtful, that does get cascaded down. Other people sense it, even if, they say the right words, right? The leaders say the right words. It's kind of a sense, I'm not sure about this. Right. And so that's really cool to help people feel at ease. And I imagine that same concept can also be in terms of if there are people within the organization that have already gone through the same or similar change, let's say in another department or another, location, if it's a larger organization, right, to say, hey, these particular individuals within the company have gone through it, right? So to tell, the newly impacted employees, here's a case study of somebody who, again, was successful, was able to transform their behavior, their task, their job, and learn these new tech skills or whatever, and come out strong on the other side. And then I love that kind of there's the at ease, and then there's also the bringing kind of the excitement to it, the possibility of something even better, and helping people, especially if they value that, right? Let's say they value the more transaction type role, going to the more analytical role. If that's something that would be fun and exciting for them, that's really great, because then that kind of fires the reward systems in their brain, and they, like, oh, this could be a good thing, and probably lean more into the discomfort of the transition. And so what about in situations that there may need to be some job loss, right? Like, how do people handle that? How do leaders communicate the change when there could very well be, or maybe they know for a fact that there will be job loss?
Yes, I think where I've seen it handled best is openness, transparency, to hit the issue head on and have an approach that makes staff feel that they're going to be taken care of somehow, right? So, as opposed to pretending it's not going to happen or avoiding it as a topic, because again, people always tend to gravitate to what's in it for me, or how is this change going to impact me, right? Whether or not they want to accept that out of the gate, or whether they say that, I think that's just human nature to be a burning question for everyone involved in what could be an uncomfortable transformation. I mean, yes, it's great if all supply chain transformations and digital transformations that I get involved in are exciting and whatnot, but they could end up impacting jobs in some way. And if there is job loss, like I've said, the best way that I've seen it handled is through open, candid discussion, and working with your human resource team to ensure that there's a method to help staff through the transition, that you're going to be there to help them if they are impacted, that you will help them with finding new work, right? Getting them in a better place, helping them with outplacement counseling, things like that. So, I think people want to know and hear that, as opposed to either A, ignoring it, or B, not providing them with any security around what that future might hold. So I think, and it depends what the culture of the company is, right? Like certain clients I've dealt with had very good culture, and they really took good care of staff. and in others, not the case, right? So I would say it's something very important, where I've seen it work best again, because depending on the timing of jobs getting impacted, you may need some of these people, to be part of the journey. They may not be there for the entirety of the journey, but you need them on board. And you may need them right away, and you may need their help. So I think you have to keep that in mind as an organization. And you want to make sure that they're taken care of and felt like they're important, as part of this journey.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, this is such common sense, but yet when there's a lot of stress and a lot of moving pieces, sometimes we forget that people are people, and they can get scared, and they wanna know that they're safe, or that someone's got their back and will hold their hand through a transition. Um,
Correct.
and so I know that communicating a change is really important, right? From a lens of change management, how we bring awareness to the change, how we verbalize it, kind of that whole beginning part of it is really important. What have you seen works really well when announcing changes?
Yeah, I think the tone from the top is very important, right? And by that I mean having thought through. And you're right, communication is so important when it comes to transformation programs. And so making sure that you have a really good understanding, a simple message about why the change is necessary, right? What are the changes that, as best as you can see, because sometimes these journeys take turns and twists, right? But I think to the extent possible, being able to clearly articulate the reason why this change needs to happen. What are some of the root causes, or maybe competitive challenges that the organization is dealing with, in order to have set you down this path? I think that's very, very important. And what are some of the benefits that you see on the other side? What is the vision, that, if as best you can describe to the organization, to get, again, people excited about what is going to take place? As much as you can bring that positive spirit to your communications, and back it up, right? And that's a very important thing too, is backing it up with thoughtful programs to help enable the change. Again, I mentioned it earlier, training is a very important aspect, upskilling, all those things that you want to get out in front of staff to ensure that they're going to be excited about it, interested in it, engaged. I think those are all things that you'd want to build into your message. But it's clear you have to have a bit of a value proposition. I mean, the executive team and sponsors may have that clarity, but making sure that it gets disseminated in a simple but meaningful way to all staff, so you have them on board with the changes, a very, very important part of the change mandate, as you said. And then it's not just a one-time communication, right? You need to have a whole strategy around communications and a program that aims to ensure that, as the program continues moving forward, that you have that continual touch point with the teams and with staff that are part of the change. And again, as I mentioned, it could be with external parties as well. It could be with customers and suppliers. So it really needs to be all encompassing, right? Because there are many stakeholders here involved, and you could have investors as well, maybe government agencies who are somehow involved in the transformation effort. And all of those parties need to be thought through, and a communication strategy developed around those key stakeholders, right? And then as you're sending these communications out, you're obviously keeping your finger on the pulse with regards to um, feedback, right? So it's not just a one-way communication. It's tell us how we're doing, tell us what fears there might be. It's a feedback mechanism to the team to then be able to say, oh, we have some concerns here that are being raised, or questions that are being raised, and we need to have a way to address those, so that, again, you can bring people along with you as you go through this change effort, as opposed to ignoring it, right? And then having different issues later on, where you did find, okay, we didn't have people on board, and now we have a real problem because we've gone through with the change, and guess what? they've reverted back to their old method of operating, or they're not on board with the new system. They're not adopting the new system. They're not using the new system. We've invested all this money, and now, we're faced with not beating the business case that we put forward because staff aren't using it, right? And we've seen that.
Yeah, thank you. So many great points there around the fact that communication is really important, right? To communicate why we need the change, why now, what are some of the things in the marketplace and in the industry that are going on, for example, that are triggering that. What's the risk of not changing, and what are the benefits, right, for us as an organization, and then also for the individual employees, right, or teams, like upscaling and things like that, and the fact that it's ongoing, right, and it's a two-way street, right, to keep the ears open, so to speak, all the time for feedback, have some things in plan. I remember one of the projects that we worked on years ago was a merger. And I remember the kind of cascade communication plan that was, in place there to support and kind of the feedback that was a part of that. So, this brings kind of to mind, I want to kind of ask maybe if you have some examples to share with us. Of course, total confidentiality, not needing to name any names, but any examples of a company that did this well, right, from start to end, and some of the nuggets, some of the tips that could be transferable to a leader who's listening to this call.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, one example that comes to mind of a company that did this very well. They were a food company, right? North American food company. We were involved in a very large digital transformation there. And I think the thing that and with that came a lot of replacement of kind of old systems. So I think the technology department that had been there for quite a while, like they had long tenured staff within their IT department who had gotten very deep and were quite entrenched in what I would call the old system landscape was. And yet they would probably be hugely impacted by what was about to happen. So you can imagine that there was a lot of fear there in that team. But I felt that the organization, the way that they had sort of put the whole program together, was quite good. They immediately, right out of the gate, I think, started to pay a lot of attention to the whole change management aspect of the project. It became very, very front and center for them. And if I had other examples, it would be where change management really wasn't, it was there, but really not there, not as important, maybe not there from the beginning, but kind of put in later on where maybe it's too late. So I would say realizing, like in this case, they realized up front that and put a conscious effort in with the right people and the right focus to say, this is going to be very important for us to take care of our people, to ensure that we're listening to their concerns as we go through this effort, and making sure that we have a good way to communicate back and forth with them, and that we're here to support them right along this journey. And so there was an entire, change management work stream where I think they did a very good job of anticipating proactively, where might that resistance come from and why, and how could they, come up with strategies to mitigate and deal with the resistance. And in that case, what they did was, as you can imagine, again, long tenured technology folks, comfortable in the status quo, now being told that all of their systems were ultimately going to be replaced. But it was going to be, the landscape was largely going to be replaced with new technology. That new technology meant that they were all going to be upskilled. The new technology meant that, in fact, their value in the marketplace was going to be substantially increased, right, after this transformation happened. So and again, that was one of the big levers here was, all that great work that you've done for the many years and your contributions that have not gone unnoticed. We need you as part of this transformation. You're an important part of the team. And by the way, on the outside end of this, once we're done, you're going to have all these great new skills that are in very high demand in the marketplace, right? So I think having that lens, Verid, on and focus in this particular case, the way that it was managed, the way that they felt that it was, again, very important from the outset, and they had a team of people looking at this on a continual basis, was really well done, and ended up with very high level of retention of the team that we thought was, going to be impacted, and we weren't sure whether or not through this effort that they, a lot of those people would be retained, but they were retained, and amazingly so. A lot of them really relished the opportunity to turn what might have been a potential negative, or potentially could have had a negative connotation, into something that was very positive for them personally, and able to upskill them in a new area, new technology, was a great outcome for them. Now, there were a few additions that this organization ended up adding into the team, which I also think is a strategy that companies need to think about. Is sometimes bringing outside perspectives is helpful. I mentioned connecting with other organizations who have done this or gone down this journey. Sometimes you do that by bringing in people from the outside, who have been through this and have that experience, right? Who can provide that, I don't like to use the word assurance, but the confidence, right? That these things, can be done successfully and can be managed appropriately to lead to the right outcomes. So I think sometimes injecting some outside expertise, or someone from the outside to the organization, to bring that level of confidence, can be also a mindful thing to drive a change effort forward in a positive way. So that's an example of one that I thought worked very well. And I mentioned the IT department, but there's a whole host of other examples that I can talk to where, dealing in supply chain, again, we have people that do planning, they do demand planning, supply planning. They are, in the work we do, we tend to bring new technology and possibly a new structure to the table, which again means organizational change, which brings anxiety, which brings, the question of, how does this change my role in the organization now that we might be shifting boxes on an org chart and restructuring a particular planning area, as an example. And so I've seen some examples there where, again, getting ahead of that before the project really gets launched is thinking it through from a people organization standpoint, working with human capital, human resources, having the right change management expertise on the team to play that role along the continuum is very, very important to help, again, anticipate, not just be reactive, but being anticipatory as it relates to these types of issues, and then having a good feedback mechanism and a good communication strategy with the people that are most impacted, so that you can appropriately deal with these types of challenges.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this example. It really does demonstrate how important it is to get out ahead of it, so to speak, as much as possible, even before officially communicating anything, to assess to the best of our abilities what the potential pockets of resistance might be. What are people thinking, feeling? What are their beliefs around that, right? Sometimes there's a carryover effect from previous change programs that may have worked or not worked. And then there's some stuff that, carries forward, and they may not believe it this time around because last time, things didn't work out like they were promised, and so on, which sometimes is the case, especially when there's a lot of change, programs one on top of the other. So what are some ways that people can do that, right? Because I think it can be kind of a tricky thing, right? To assess the pockets of resistance, because if we don't really want people to know it yet, especially in a small company, we can assume what some of those might be, but we don't actually know until we know, right? Until we hear it. So I suppose there could be, confidential things that could be done, or bringing in a consultant, to ask the questions. How are you guys feeling? But if we don't want them to know just yet, right? Even if it's the decision as to whether or not to do the change depends on, what level of risk is there from a change management perspective. How do you get the information?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say sometimes it's done through surveys, right? Like you could go out and do a anonymous survey to poll the sentiments, right? And so that is one way you could sort of get some feedback from people, from different departments, from different groups within the org structure, just to get a sense of where do people sit, right? So that could be done in confidence, right, as one way to capture some good information. So I've seen that. I've seen that in some circumstances. The other is to do some type of focus groups within, the employee base. That tends to be a little bit more difficult. You will get a mixture of different reactions. There would be some people who will choose to be quite vocal and they'll be fine to sort of raise their voice. But the risk there is, of course, people won't really speak their mind, right? And so I think that that's certainly an option and a possibility, but you do run the risk of not really getting, I would say, candid feedback in that type of forum. I'd say a anonymous survey is a much better route to take so that people can, again, share their feedback. The other is through, again, an anonymous sort of feedback mechanisms, whether it's a survey or if you provide a confidential route for people to share feedback. That is also another possibility, right, that I've seen organizations use. And then there is just the water cooler. I would not underestimate the water cooler talk. I mean, obviously, not so much during COVID, but certainly water cooler talk and rumors. Keeping your ear to the ground for those types of things is a very important part of what you're going to, it's not a formal way to get feedback, but believe me, just as valuable as maybe some of the formal ways to get communications is the water cooler talk. What are people saying? And you're likely to get that bubble up somehow, some way, and it'll be important feedback for certainly the executive teams steering these types of projects, right? So water cooler talk is very important.
Yeah. And I imagine that once we get that feedback, whether it's through an anonymous survey, a focus group, some other anonymous way, pre the change, but also throughout the change, that we have some processes in place to respond to that, right?
Correct.
Correct. So what if we get feedback, but we can't quite, let's say people are not pleased, but we can't change some things, right? Like, let's say they're very strict boundaries, right? There isn't a lot of flexibility. Then what, right? It's like you get feedback, but you can't necessarily do something about it. How do you handle that?
Yeah, again, I think being candid, right? Open, transparent communications, to me, from what I've seen in my dealings and with clients, is probably the best way to go. I think where you're not sharing and you're not being candid, it just allows too much opportunity for a lot of rumors to spread and misinformation to get spread. So I think as much as possible, being open and transparent and having that as a mantra of communication strategy is important. So if there are things you cannot do, because let's face it, there's going to be things, as you said, you're going to have ability to control certain things and do certain things, and there could be things outside of your control. I think being very clear that those are the boundaries, right? And you'll do your best to do certain things, but in some cases, there will be some things out of your control. Again, open, transparent communication to me has been what I've seen works well. It may not be what people like to hear, but I think they appreciate it ultimately, versus getting some misinformation or being mismanaged in a way where you might have committed something that you're unable to commit, and then you have to go back on it. And so the program loses credibility, right? And so do the executive teams that attach their names to this. And so I think it's important to always have that open, transparent mindset as it relates to how you communicate as much as possible. Let's face it, there could be confidential information that you're unable to share, right? And that situation does happen too. But as much as you can be open, transparent, that would be my recommendation based on what I've seen.
And let's say again, for a senior executive that has him or her, his or her team, and maybe some of the team members are opposed to the change or opposed to some aspects of the change. How do you handle that, right? You need your team to be on board so that, they can help the rest of the chain down the line, so to speak. But what do you do in that case?
Yeah, again, to me, it's getting to really understand why that person, and again, I say it down to the person level, because you can do your best to segment your stakeholders and um, you know identify a potential group of a department, so a group of demand planners or a group of supply planners, or it could be uh, people doing transportation planning or people in the warehouse, right? So you can do segmentation of stakeholders at a certain level, but the reality is that my perspective is not every stakeholder is equal. There are going to be some stakeholders and some employees who have a very loud voice, who are very much respected within the organization. And so people will look to what they say and what they think. So again, you have to really segment those people out and say, well, those are the people that are super important for us to make sure, we that they're armed with the right communications to share with the rest of the employee base, right? And so if you have people on your own team who aren't, they're not pro the change, I think it's really your responsibility to peel back the onion and say, let's understand what is really the concern here, and really being thoughtful around making sure that you're addressing what the root cause is. So if it is, I'm worried about losing my job, reassure them that that's not part of the plan, right? If it's about, I'm not sure that I can, adjust to this new technology, then reassure them that you're going to make sure that there's training and digital upskilling available for them, right? Again, it's a reassurance, and giving them comfort that you're there to support them and help make them successful. And also at the same time, an acknowledgement that you need them, as you said, to be part of the change as well. Some of it would be looking at ways they get measured and metrics and rewarded, right? So depending on the nature of the change, in some cases, transformation programs do have special incentives to people. So if they have to be on a transformation effort for a long or extended period of time, maybe there's certain retention strategies that you can think about, if they are certainly key for that project, right? So I think those are some things that organizations need to think about. If there are certain individuals who are critical in order to get this program in place, then you have to really think about retention and retention strategies as part of the overall thinking. If they're deemed to be critical for the success of the program, and if they're critical to drive the results that you intend to get out of the program, then yes, you have to look at ways they get measured and rewarded as part of the program.
I really appreciate that you brought that up, because it's the whole concept of reinforcement, right? To continuously reinforce, right? Whether it's through rewards, like a spot bonus or whatever that might be, Pizza Friday, right? Anything at all.
Correct.
And the back with, nice, sincere acknowledgement, but to continuously acknowledge the efforts and, of course, where possible, the results as well. And you also brought up a point around the fact that, yes, there's a big change potentially that could be happening, meaning it impacts many people, but yet really for the change to be successful, every individual needs to be able to feel safe, right? To feel like, that sense of ease, or at least a lack of, of the anxiety, if you will, or softened anxiety. And,
Correct.
and especially for those individuals that are particularly actively resisting the change, and especially those that have influence, that have a lot of rapport with others, and whether or not they're a formal, manager or director, leader, but they have a lot of sway. And to
Correct.
focus the resources on them, I guess, to really listen to what are the root concerns, because oftentimes I think with change is that we just don't know the truth. Like, we may assume that people are feeling how they're feeling for a certain reason, but that might not be the case, right? Sometimes they may not fear job loss, but maybe they're just, feeling upset because they can't, have lunch with their favorite person that they meet with for lunch anymore because the schedule has changed or the location has changed or whatever. Right? It could be something minor, but until we know the truth of what they're actually thinking and feeling, we're limited as to the strategies, whether it's a communication strategy, feedback strategy, or any other strategy. And then, the thing is that, it's like you've got the technical side again, and then the people side, and they have to work together, right? Because if people are not learning as quickly, let's say, right, we give them the knowledge, we give them the abilities of training, right, that up leveling, but maybe, let's say, the productivity is not as high as it should be, or the accuracy, the quality of the results are not quite there yet because there's a learning curve, then I imagine that impacts the technology side, right, the timing of when things are rolled out and so on. So how does the tech side and the change management side play together?
Well, as you said, it's all integrated, right? So, typically a transformation plan would have an integrated plan, right, with different work streams, looking at the different aspects of the program. So you would have a change management work stream, you would have a technology work stream, you would have a process work stream, you would have an organizational change work stream. Because again, if you're looking at a integrated transformation plan, you would have all of these segments, because there could be an organizational structural change, there could be people change, there could be technology change, there could be facility changes, right? In a lot of work we do. Again, you could have closure, you could have new locations opening. So, or you could be retrofitting a facility, right? If you're putting in a new level of automation in a distribution center, as an example. So there could be facility changes and real estate implications. So this would be an integrated plan, an integrated roadmap. And to your point, Verid, the change management aspect is part of that integrated roadmap. It's not a separate plan on its own. It would be one of the many work streams that I would expect to see in a transformation roadmap. And that would be, each work stream would have its own team and its own lead, but all of those leads would be working very closely together, right? So as information is accumulated, gathered through some of the work that would be happening within various work streams, it would be shared amongst the leaders of the work streams, so that as a change management leader, I would want to know, are we hearing any noise about these particular changes? As this role in this part of our organization changes, are we seeing or hearing any anxiety or anything that we need to know, that we need to build into our training for that particular role or for that particular person, right? So it's integrated as part of the overall transformation plan. It's one work stream, it would have its own leader, but that leader would be working with all the other leaders to make sure that they're sharing information as part of the project governance, right? And acting accordingly to address and deliver all their deliverables along the way.
And sometimes when I train, I train groups of leaders, CEOs on change management. And one of the things that I often hear is kind of this mindset of, there's so much to deal with when there's change, right? And also limited resources, right? So what happens often is that, as you said earlier, a lot of companies don't pay enough attention to the change management, the human side of the change. They just kind of, leaders put as much as they can on the technical side, making sure they've got the right consultants, the right things in place. And they're like, they're hopeful that people will, learn what they need to learn and keep going. But the reality is that, it's one of the smartest investments that could be made during a change, especially if the culture of the organization is not very change ready, or, there's more risk, right? Meaning maybe there have been some changes that didn't go through or something like that. So if you were to speak directly to a leader who's hearing this, who's like, should I do this? Shouldn't I do this? Right? In terms of putting more of my resources, my attention on the change management side of things, what would you say to them?
Well, as you were talking, in my mind, I was thinking, okay, those organizations that didn't pay attention to this, or didn't really feel that this was an important area that needed to be considered as part of an overall transformation program, I would really want to see what types of results they've been able to achieve. right? So I would say that in my experience, and if you know, and I tend to try to read as much as I can on this type of area, and you know, certainly supply chain transformation, and you know, what are the things that enable successful projects, and what are the things that cripple, you know, projects from achieving the goals and the benefits that they hope. You know, people always come, you know, a lot of it always comes down to people, right? Um, in many cases, the technologies that we work with, I wouldn't say in all cases, you know, some technologies are on, quote, the bleeding edge, but a lot of technologies that we work with, and certainly, you know, within the firm that I'm a part of, you know, these have been tried and tested, and we're not out there. I mean, some clients do custom develop things, and they are trying new technologies and new innovative things. Um, but in most cases, the technology is not the problem. Um, it's usually that the people haven't really been considered as part of the change. So I would say to those executives that do your homework. Look at the organizational change programs that did not take uh, change management seriously, and see whether they were able to drive the results that they were hoping to drive. Right. And it's easy for me to say, again, I have another example, if I may, Farid, a client that was going through a structural change. They changed their business strategy. As part of that, there were three divisions within the company that they were consolidating into one overall division. So as opposed to having three different divisions going to their customers, you know, and trying to sell them from the three divisions, they were going to collapse the divisions. Um, those divisions basically made different food products, but they were going to collapse them into one. And we were working with the supply chain and chief operating officer of the organization to collapse the planning function, right? Now, the planners within those three organizations all had their own specific, and they had been acquired, right? So over time, these three divisions came together through acquisition in the past, right? And so they were in the prior days, they were three different companies, right, that were brought together. Now they were actually bringing them together structurally under one umbrella. But the three companies in the past used three different technologies, right? So the planning groups we were working with all had three different technologies that they were using and accustomed to, right? We were now going to erase all those three technologies, the legacy solutions, and replace them with a new solution, right? And there was, what I would say is, this is probably an example of a company that had a lot of things going on, right? They had all sorts of strategy, you know, changes, strategic changes happening to the business. Um, I would say, looking back, this was a company that tried to, but didn't put a lot of effort into the change management aspect of what they were trying to do. So I will just make the long story short. What happened was the technology went in. As I said, technology worked. What didn't work was the planners were very used to their old system as part of their old systems that they used to use. And so user adoption became an issue, right? So what happened was the planners were not using the new system. What the planners were doing is they were working off on various Excel spreadsheets, which gave them great comfort because that was part of the old model, I would say, that they had. So they had old systems, but they also had old Excel spreadsheets they were using. And so ultimately, this client and company did not get the benefits of the new system that they were hoping to. They did not get the user adoption that they were hoping for, right? And I think part of it was that they did not put the time and the focus and the energy on change management as they should have in this particular instance, right? So that's just an example. So I would say, back to your question, um, I would be hard pressed, and I think people would be hard pressed to find very good examples of organizations that have not paid a lot of attention to people and change management, and yet have gotten outstanding results. I think you're going to find the latter. You're going to find the latter, right? And there's so many examples of that, right? So that would be my recommendation to executives. Do not underestimate the importance of people in a transformation, and do not underestimate the importance of change and managing that change with people, because they will be critical. They will make or break the project.
Wow. Yeah, thank you. And it's absolutely true that research also backs everything that you're sharing up. And I really, really appreciate the example. I mean, year to year, of course, the percentage success meaning the company's ability to achieve the intended business outcomes, sometimes it ranges from 70 to, 85% some years. Failure. So because they did not pay enough attention to the people side of the change. So it really is true from what we see in results that, that side, people's comfort, safety, ability to be able to adopt the new behaviors, right? That, to do the new behaviors that they need to be doing, is so critical and can potentially save a lot of money, right? If it's done right, up front, later on, right? In terms of dealing with stuff, with issues. But also, of course, it's such a shame, and an example that you shared, imagine so many dollars, so much effort, so much, heart went into getting this done right. And it failed not because the technology failed. So thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I would just add one comment, if I
Please.
may, Bird, which is I've seen a lot of companies and executive teams. They're so focused on the project budget, they miss the big picture, right? And so they will cut budgets with regards to some of the people and change management aspects of what needs to get done. They will place more money in terms of the technical stuff that needs to get done, only to find, right, that they've missed the bigger picture, meaning the benefits that they were supposed to be getting, right? Like it's as if they would be missing the forest for the trees, so to speak, right? I would be careful not to try to minimize or cut that budget only to make the project itself be on time and on budget, but after the fact, miss the fact that the benefits you were hoping to get out on the back end needed people on board, right, in order to go through the transition. And if those people are not on board and you don't have user adoption of any new technology, you're not going to drive the benefits that you were hoping for. Hence the high percentage of failures, because I think maybe the project didn't, quote, fail outright, but it failed to deliver the results that were expected. And I think that's where I've seen a lot of projects fail, is they have not delivered the expected benefits. And one of the main reasons is they did not take the people along appropriately through the journey.
Yeah, thank you. And I know, just in terms of how we measure, the success of a change program, oftentimes is three things. One is the utilization rate. So how many of the impacted employees are doing what they need to do in the way that they need to do it. There's also the speed with which things are adopted. And of course, there is the accuracy, right? The efficiency, the quality of the output, right? Are they doing it correctly, right? So it really is so important. And at the end of the day, it's of course not only the monetary return on investment, it's people. And leaders care about their people, and they care about their mental, emotional, physical well-being. And stress is not healthy for the body, it's not healthy for the leaders, it's not healthy for people. And so when we look at it, as you said, from a bigger picture perspective, it's softer, it's a lot more compassionate, and it works. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Lino. I am just so grateful to you for many reasons, as you know, throughout our history, and also for today. And how can people learn more about PwC Canada, about the kinds of work that you and your teams do?
Sure. I mean, they can certainly reach out to me. But I'd be very happy to hear from people, and I'd be happy that they reached out to me directly. Obviously, so you can, I guess they'll be able to. You'll provide them with my contact info, Barry, because obviously they can reach out to me at PwC Canada, or we have the pwc.com website, through which I think you can get to PwC Canada. And we have on our website, the services that we offer within our supply chain and digital operations team. So, I would direct people to the website, but certainly you can reach out to me at any time And as I've said, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored that you asked me to share time with you, and I'm hoping that some of the things that I've seen through my journey and career can be of some help to your listeners, obviously. So if I've done that, then it's been a successful time with you. But it's been such a pleasure to see you and spend time with you, Barrett. And as I said, I'm honored to have been part of this podcast.
Oh, thank you so much, Lino. I'm certain that those people listening got value, whether they were on the leader side or even on the other side, by the way, if they're the impacted employees, because now they know what to ask for, right? What they need in order to be successful and for the organization to be more successful. So absolutely, I'm certain there's beautiful, beautiful gifts that you've given to people. And I imagine that people can reach out to you on LinkedIn. That's one way. Are there any other ways to reach out to you directly?
They can email me, right, at lino.casalino@pwc.com. And so that would be my email. But you're right, LinkedIn obviously is a way that I get connected with a lot of people. But they can reach me via email, and I will not turn down any questions or any requests that come my way.
Well, thank you again, Lino. Really a lot of gratitude to you and the good work that you and your teams are doing.
Thank you very much, Barrett. I really appreciate it again.